Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zane here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online series 11 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. It's the start of a brand new ranked season, and this is actually the final ranked season for Series 11, as we'll be switching to the Series 12 rule set in February. If you've not seen the announcement for the Series 12 rules, it's basically Series 11 with one more restricted Pokemon allowed, so you'll be allowed 2 restricted Pokemon, and you'll be allowed to Dynamax as well. I have not played any of Series 12 yet, but of course we'll start my coverage of it relatively soon as I learn the format. And so throughout January, you can expect a mix of BDSP battles, Series 11 VGC laddering, and Series 12 preview content. So thanks so much as always for watching, and for this video, I'll be using a really hyper-offensive Calyrex Shadow Rider team that actually finished 12th on the ladder in the previous ranked season. It was originally built by a Japanese player called Yu, who I've linked down on Twitter below, and I wanted to feature it because I actually lost against this team a lot while I was climbing the ladder and just trying out different kinds of teams. And so it centers around Calyrex Shadow Rider with Focus Sash. And Calyrex is a Pokemon that you should get familiar with because this is going to be everywhere, especially in the early Series 12 metagame. And so this is a Focus Sash variant rather than a Life Orb variant, which is pretty interesting. And the main reason is because this Calyrex actually often gets more value out of non-Dynamaxing rather than Dynamaxing, as your best 2 moves in Astral Barrage and Expanding Force are spread type attacks. And so you ideally want to hit both of your opponent's Pokemon rather than just one really powerful max move. And so the Calyrex is supported by Whimsicott, which allows the Tailwind as well as Psychic Terrain from Tapu. The idea is that Calyrex already is one of the fastest Pokemon in the format, and so when you combine it with Tailwind, there's basically nothing that will outspeed you, and so you just move before they will. And the Focus Sash makes a big difference as well because it allows Calyrex to survive really powerful max moves, and just really any attack that can normally hit it for 4 times super effective, like Dark or Ghost type attacks. Lele is really important in setting up Psychic Terrain, and to round out the team, you've got AV, Thundurus, Life Orb, Entei, and Urshifu. These are all pretty standard sets for the most part, but Thundurus and Entei are going to be by far your best max options with this team. Foul Play on Thundurus is also pretty interesting because you can max Darkness to lower your opponent's special defense, allowing Calyrex and Tapu to do more damage with their special attacks. Max Entei is really cool because it is directly a counter into Zacian, which obviously is the most common restricted that you're going to run into, but can also be pretty good in the Sun matchup as you can just tail in the Whimsicott, and then Max Rockfall Charizard, or Max Flare Venusaur, Max Rockfall Torkoal, for example, and Life Orb Entei also just does a ton of damage, especially because you can't intimidate it thanks to Inner Focus. And finally, you've got Mystic Water Urshifu, which is pretty standard here, especially because the Focus Sash is taken on Calyrex. The last thing I'll comment on here is Switcheroo with Eject Button on Whimsicott. Really powerful combination, especially because Focus Sash on Calyrex here is really important. And with Switcheroo, you're able to just eject something out, and that can potentially just win you the game on turn 1, especially when you go like Whimsicott, Calyrex, and Switcheroo into a move, for example, and just force your opponent's Dynamax Pokemon out. So it's a really powerful combination. We've used it plenty of times before. The main thing to watch out for is that you have Tapu on this team, so don't set up that Psychic Terrain unless you're confident you're going to, not be going for Switcheroo, or you've already gotten the Switcheroo off, right? So like leading something like Whimsicott and Lele might be a little bit counterintuitive because you set up the Psychic Terrain, preventing you from using the Switcheroo on the opposing grounded Pokemon. And actually, one final thing to mention here is that Calyrex has Trick Room, and that seems a little bit weird, but the main reason you have it is because this is a hyper-offense team, so you're really weak against opposing Trick Room teams, or any team that has Trick Room and bulky Pokemon, since you're so frail with most of the Pokemon on this team. So Trick Room can be used as a surprise to reverse opposing Trick Rooms, and can really hard punish teams that are very, very dedicated to setting up Trick Room in the early game, especially some of those Calyrex Ice Rider teams with Mimikyu and Incineroar, for example. So overall, this is just really one of the strongest teams that I have run against. Like, I've lost against this a lot, and I just really struggled because it can win games so quickly. If you play perfectly with this team, like, you can win the game in essentially like 2 to 3 turns, but even if you don't play perfectly, it gives you plenty of room to just like make maybe not the best play, but the point is that, yeah, you just have a lot of room to work with because there's so much heavy offense, and you often will be moving before your opponent. So yeah, excited to dive into this one. Thanks so much as always for watching. If you enjoyed, please share your support by leaving a like on the video. I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, I want to know what you think about the Series 12 rule set down in the comment section below. Let's get started. Alright, our very first game of the brand new rank season, and it's a Xerneas team with Venusaur, Torkoal, Coalossal, Raikou, and Dragonite. Xerneas is really cool to see here, as well as Dragonite. We used Dragonite Coalossal a long time ago. And so the idea is that you have safety goggles often with Aqua Jet, and you can just self-Aqua Jet and ignore Amoonguss and any redirection users, and just immediately activate Coalossal. So they don't have any Ghost resists. Or Psychic Resists at that. So I feel like Lele plus Calyrex should be a really strong combination for us. I guess the interesting question here is who do I want to Dynamax? Because I don't really love maxing Thundurus, Urshifu, or Entei here. You know what can be so sick? We can actually lead with this Whimsicott. Yeah, we can lead with the Whimsicott here, and because we've got the eject button and the switcheroo, we can just switcheroo onto the Coalossal and force them to switch out. That would be really sick. So I'd like Whimsicott plus Calyrex lead. I don't want to lead Lele because I don't want to set up the Psychic Terrain too early on in this match. And then for the final Pokemon, I actually think Entei as a Dynamax option can be pretty powerful here. Otherwise, it's Thundurus, but honestly, I kind of like Entei here because they have a Sun component with their team. I think Max Entei can one-shot a lot of my opponent's Pokemon. And the main thing here is if they play towards Coalossal, this Whimsicott just by itself should make my opponent's life really difficult. Because we'll have higher priority than Aqua Jet, so I'll get the switcheroo off before Aqua Jet goes off, and then my opponent will essentially eject themselves out. But they're going to go with Raikou and Xerneas. Okay. Raikou and Xerneas is also fine. I can still actually just go for the switcheroo play into the Astral Barrage. Astral Barrage here is super safe. The question is, would I rather target Xerneas or would I rather target Raikou? If you're my opponent, I could actually see them protecting Xerneas and going for a Snarl turn 1 with Raikou. That's certainly a possibility. I don't mind going for it, though, honestly. Like, Snarl's not going to be the end of the world for us, honestly. I just don't want Xerneas to get set up here. Is that Max Raikou or Max Xerneas? Okay, either way, I didn't expect either of these Pokemon to max on turn 1, to be honest. Huh, it's Dynamax Raikou. That's fascinating. Okay. Well, either way, I'm okay with it because even if you're going for Max Darkness, Calyrex will survive thanks to the Focus Sash. So does Xerneas protect here? They do, it looks like. Wow, okay, fantastic play by them. Very interesting. The thing is, if you're going for the target onto Calyrex, I can actually just switch and eject the Raikou out this next turn. And I think we're still in a really prime position to just sweep with the late game Entei. There's Max Darkness, yeah. Okay, so that Dynamax actually makes a lot of sense because what they're thinking is, hey, I'm not going to KO the Calyrex if it's Life Orb Calyrex and a Dynamax is turn 1, for example, with the Snarl. So I'd rather go for Max Darkness here so that I can get a one-hit KO onto a Dynamax Calyrex. Based off that damage output on Raikou, it looks like Assault Vest to me. So I can actually just force out Raikou right now with the switcheroo play. The problem is then Xerneas actually gets the Geomancy off, and the question is whether or not I'm comfortable letting a Geomancy go off here. Honestly, I don't feel that bad playing against Raikou because we've got this Dynamax Entei we can play towards. So while it would be fun to eject out the Raikou, I think I'd rather just make sure Xerneas doesn't get set up here. So I'm just going to go for the switch run to Xerneas and an Astral Barrage onto it. Dynamax Raikou is also not a very big threat into Whimsicott, but they actually switch out the Xerneas, okay, into Coalossal. Nicely done. So we're going to take away Coalossal's weakness policy. Unfortunately, it doesn't really give Whimsicott any value, but then the thing is I can, once again trade this weakness policy and get rid of another one of my opponent's items. Okay. So this is totally fine because, first of all, I have to give my opponents props. I think they've actually played the first 2 turns of this game as well as possible. But I think that we have an inherent team advantage here, so even with all of that, I actually still feel pretty confident about our position. They're going to go for Max Lightning this time around. Yep, onto the Calyrex. Okay, no problem. Now, like I said, I'm pretty sure this is going to be Assault Vest on the Entei, right? We still have multiple turns of Dynamax to play towards. It's pretty free to actually just bring in Choice Specs Tapu Lele here immediately. That changes the terrain. And I don't mind that, I think. Because here's what I can do. I can bring out Specs Tapu Lele. At this point, Specs Moonblast is going to be really strong against my opponent's entire team. And I don't really need to go for the switcheroo stuff anymore because I have enough damage output to just KO Xerneas. I don't really need to care that much about Xerneas setting up at this point. So what I can do in this position is Tailwind. This ensures that we have the speed advantage going into this endgame, and I'm just going to go for the Choice Specs Moonblast onto Dragonite. Maybe Dragonite protects, maybe it switches out, but I'm never KOing Raikou with an attack here anyway, barring like a critical hit. So I'd rather just try to KO Dragonite because it's kind of a nuisance for Whimsicott, as you can KO us with the dual Wing Beat. And they don't have Protector, they're not going for it here. So that's also good to see. So my question here is whether or not the Dragonite can somehow hang on from the Choice Specs Moonblast. But we do get the KO cleanly. Perfect. So, like, the Focus Sash on Calyrex is what saves us in this game, right? And what makes them Dynamaxing on turn 1 actually not end up being that scary. So they're actually just going to strike into the Whimsicott here. And they get a one-hit KO, but it's actually the perfect time for them to get a one-hit KO because it allows me to get a free switch in. I'm curious what move Max Strike is coming from here, actually. I'm not sure. Dynamax Raikou is definitely not something you see very often, and I never thought we'd have a matchup where my opponent Dynamaxes Raikou and I end up maxing Entei, but that most likely is going to be the case here. So I'm going to bring out Entei. They're going to bring out Coalossal, no problem. And Coalossal without Weakness Policy or Dynamax is obviously infinitely less scary. So the main thing to watch out for here is obviously the Snarl from Raikou. I can just Dynamax here. I wonder if a Max Strike here gets the KO onto Raikou, because I'm not sure I want to necessarily set up the Sun. Because I don't really want Coalossal to do more damage right now. But Coalossal's never really KOing Entei, right? I feel like Entei should just KO everything cleanly. And even with the Sun up, I'm not sure you KO the Tapu Lele without any boosts. So I'm just going to go Max Flare into Raikou, Moonblast into Coalossal. Even if the... I mean, I don't think Entei's ever not getting the KO here into Raikou. Like, I don't think Raikou should survive Max Flare. And based off the Astro Barrage damage from earlier, like I said, I'm pretty sure that it is Assault Vested. So, yeah. And this is the thing, right? Like, yes, my opponent had a cool turn 1 Dynamax, but in the end, they didn't actually get that much mileage out of this Max Raikou. So, they're not going to protect either Pokemon. We'll get Max Flare off here. I want to just target Entei here because I know it's not going to have Protect if it's running an Assault Vest, which at this point, like, I'd be really surprised if it weren't AV based off that damage output from Astro Barrage. So, that always just guarantees us a KO onto that slot, essentially. I actually could have doubled up onto the Raikou slot to cover for a Xerneas switch in case Xerneas is really bulky and survives the Flare. So, Moonblast does not get the KO on Coalossal. They're going to go for Heat Wave. Entei dodges it. That's not the important one. Is going to connect with Lele, but yeah, Coalossal is just really not that scary without the boosts. So, my opponent's last Pokemon, of course, is going to be that Xerneas. I mean, we still have multiple turns of Tailwind here. Xerneas really can't ever beat the Entei either. I have 2 turns of Tailwind. If you're my opponent, you should Geomancy here, in my opinion. I think I'm just going to Max Flare here and Moonblast. I could double up on Xerneas, but I'm afraid that I double up into a Protect. Actually, I think doubling is correct here, right? Because even if Coalossal knocks out Lele, I can always just Flare to knock out your Xerneas the subsequent turn. Although I think Life Orb Max Flare in Sun probably KO Xerneas here anyway, so I think splitting it is fine. Yeah, and they go for Protect. With that Protect here, actually, we should always win the game. The one thing I didn't want to do was double up into a Protect and let Coalossal get a free attack off, and maybe Heat Wave like just gets a high roll or a crit or burn on the Lele. And as you can see there, Flare would get the knockout onto Xerneas anyway. So, yeah, I think my opponent's Dynamax on turn 1 is really strong if I end up not being Focus Sash on Calyrex, and especially if I Dynamax Calyrex, like that's actually a game-winning play potentially. So I can totally see why my opponent went for it. Raikou maxing was, yeah, definitely unexpected, just because on their team I feel like they have multiple strong options in the Coalossal, for example. But yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. So this is where, like, I think why Focus Sash Calyrex is a really strong offensive option, and it's something that as we go into, you know, Series 12 is interesting to think about as well, just because you can obviously only Dynamax one Pokemon. So if you're pairing Calyrex with a Pokemon that almost always prefers the Dynamax, then Sash is, you know, often a stronger item, especially because Calyrex can get one-shot by a lot of those 4-time super effective max moves. So, yeah, that's what my opponent was going for with that Raikou, but fortunately enough, we weathered the storm, didn't really take too much damage from it, and ultimately conserved our Dynamax with the Entei, and we were able to just sweep with it in the end game. So, yeah. So Weather Ball, Focus Sash, Coalossal, Wolfie's Coalossal, that's really cool. Citrus on the Torkoal, Clear Smog, pretty interesting. That obviously helps against a lot of setup. Assault Vest Raikou, as we saw, it was Weather Ball, okay. That's a move I was thinking. I didn't know if Raikou got access to any other normal attacks there, but that's really cool. And then Plunder Policy Dragonite. That is interesting. Okay. Running Dual Wing Bee and Iron Tail, so you can maybe get a boost off from either of those. And this actually maybe means that Dragonite can be a potential max option as well. Probably still, like, I would almost always max Coalossal or Venu with this team, with some Raikou flex picks like my opponent did, but, you know, you can always keep your options open. So, yeah, that was a really fun first game, so let's just look for another one. Wow, we're running into some really interesting teams here. This one's a Giratina Origin Form team with Entei, Celesteela, Landorus, Tapu, Bulu, and Sableye. Tapu Bulu actually makes this really intriguing, actually as well as Celesteela. Because, you know, to counter Sableye, normally Tapu Lele is a really good answer. It just sets up the Psychic terrain, preventing Sableye from going for any of its Prankster attacks really onto our side of the field. But with Bulu, they can also change the terrain. And also, even with Thundurus, because Thundurus isn't grounded, even if I set up the Psychic terrain, it doesn't matter in stopping Prankster attacks. Thundurus is actually really interesting here, right? Because they've got Landorus, Celesteela, Bulu. So it's obviously quite good against all of those, but I really have to respect Will-O-Wisp coming out from Sableye. I feel like Dynamax Entei here actually might be it. This is a really interesting one because I feel like all of our Pokemon are really strong, but I obviously have to drop a couple in order to actually play the match. If I were my opponent, I would think maybe something like Sableye Landorus, Sableye Celesteela. So I'm thinking we go Whimsicott. I really like Max Entei again, honestly, with Lele and Calyrex in the back. Now, the tricky thing here is in bringing the 4 that I'm choosing here, I'm a little bit weak to Landorus, a little bit weaker to it than I'd like. And I think Thundurus would have been a really good option here, but I just don't love the idea of bringing Thundurus and then just getting burnt by Will-O-Wisp from Sableye, because I don't really have a way to stop it. No Lumberry on the Thundurus, and Psychic Terrain, like I just mentioned, doesn't really help us either. So then the way to do it would be to eliminate Sableye. Maybe they don't feel comfortable bringing Sableye because of, you know, the amount of heavy offense that we have. It's going to be Giratina and Landorus. Okay. Honestly, turn 1, I don't mind just going for a trick onto the Landorus and then just forcing that out immediately. Mainly curious about Giratina here, but Giratina's not that scary considering, and we are max speed here, so yeah. I'm just going to go for Switcheroo onto Landorus, max here, and then I don't mind just flaring. That sets up the sun for us. I also have actually never seen the interaction between Trick / Switcheroo against Giratina Origin Form. I would assume it's kind of like Zacian, where the move just fails, but I actually have no idea, because I've never seen it before. Giratina Origin Form, obviously not exactly a very common restricted Pokemon in Series 11. So if they Dynamax Landorus on turn 1, like, the beauty of this team is even if you don't get the Switcheroo off, it's totally okay, but if you do, you often can just win the game in one turn. Like, that's the strength of it. So, like, if my opponent just ends up maxing Landorus turn 1, they're just going to be in really bad shape. But they don't, so good decision. Either way, though, you know, the idea was I never wanted to get one-shot by Landorus, and so even just taking away its item is always nice. And it's actually Citrus Berry Landorus. Wow, okay. That's really intriguing. Life Orb Max Flare actually just gets the KO there, so we steal Citrus on the way out, which is pretty nice. And I'm mainly curious what Giratina goes for now. Let's see. Poltergeist, whoa. And we actually dodge it, unfortunately, for them. I mean, we definitely would have survived, but that's obviously a huge, huge miss, because now I just have so much HP to work with in the remainder of this game, right? So, Sableye comes out. Okay. I've even got the Citrus Berry now, which is kind of cool. Honestly, I don't mind switching Whimsicott into Lele. I don't even care if you quash me, right? Yeah, honestly, I feel like here it's fine to just Moonblast and then go for a Max Flare onto the Sableye slot. Mainly curious how much damage Poltergeist does. Okay, so they're going to Dynamax the Giratina here, which is really cool. Now, the upside for my opponent is that they have the Dynamax advantage right now, right? I maxed one turn earlier, and so that gives them some room to work with. But, yeah, I was definitely not expecting Citrus Landorus. I was kind of expecting Landorus to max on turn 1, and then I was also not expecting Poltergeist on Giratina. But I guess I don't really know what to expect from Giratina to begin with. Okay, so they're going to go for Quash, which is fine. Even with that, like, we should always survive an attack from Giratina here, which is why I didn't mind staying in. And get a special attack drop. That shouldn't really matter here. Oh, it is going to be Max Wormwind, so I wonder if now they can survive a Max Flare, potentially. That might be the case. But I think with Lele and the Calyrex in the back for us, our endgame still looks very, very powerful right now. And yeah, that actually will allow Sableye to survive. Okay, nicely done. So it's going to eat up its Citrus Berry here. Yep, makes sense. They're probably going to go for Quash again into Max Wormwind, I would think. Did a decent amount of damage. What am I scared of my opponent's last Pokemon being? I think it's most likely going to be the... What do I think it's most likely going to be? Tapu Bulu makes the most sense to me. Honestly, here, I don't mind just going for a Moonblast and a Max Flare, I think, onto the Sableye slot. I could switch into Lele, but the idea is to, like, get the knockout onto the Sableye. They go for Quash. So I could have gone for a Tailwind there, but I didn't mind splitting my damage here because it ensures I always get the knockout onto Sableye. You can only Quash one of my 2 Pokemon. And by doing this, now it means that I win the Terrain War, even if your last Pokemon is Tapu Bulu. And if it's Tapu Bulu, then Calyrex is just prime for a sweep at this point. Okay, so they did double up onto the Whimsicott slot, which is a nice play. Now, it is Max Airstream, so this does give the Giratina a speed boost. And that's pretty interesting. Especially because my Dynamax is about to end. Okay. So, I think I'd rather go out into Calyrex first, but that having Max Airstream actually changes a lot here, I think. That was a really nice play by them. And their last Pokemon is indeed Tapu Bulu. Okay. This is where if I had clicked Tailwind with Whimsicott last turn, the game would 100% be over, but because I didn't, and try to cover and guarantee the knockout there, I just didn't think Whimsicott would faint, actually, but even if they didn't have Airstream, they should probably always, like, I shouldn't be surprised by that, right? Well, this actually suddenly makes the game very interesting, because, yeah, I just wasn't expecting Giratina having a form of speed control via Max Airstream, but that's not exactly super surprising. So I could switch Entei out into Tapu Lele here. I actually think that's not a bad play. Alternatively, I can just Astro Barrage here and just Flare Blitz into Tapu Bulu. Okay, Bulu protects. Who does Calyrex target? We're still faster than the Giratina even after the speed boost, which I'm not surprised about, but that's good to confirm. So another Astro Barrage will obviously finish it off. They are going to go for Airstream here, and they're going to target Entei. Okay. So this works out okay for me, I think, because now I changed the terrain with Tapu Lele. It's going to be a really close finish, but I feel pretty good about my spot. My main mistake in this game was not Tailwinding with Whimsicott, because I basically had a guaranteed Tailwind up, and it was just because I wasn't really expecting Max Airstream from Giratina. I don't know what I was expecting. This Pokemon is just so rare. And so, yeah, I basically had no expectations of it, like, increasing its speed, but Max Airstream makes a ton of sense on a Pokemon like that. But it worked out well here. I have the Focus Sash on Calyrex anyway. That last one actually was a little bit risky on my end, because maybe my Calyrex just gets doubled up into... Actually, if that's the case, though, then I just Flare Blitz KO your Bulu, and then it's a 2v1, right? So I just Stone Edge and Moonblast. Anyway, last turn of Sun, +1 speed, +1 defense, +2 speed here. I'm content to just go for Astro Barrage. And I don't think Bulu should outspeed us at +1 speed, right? So we should always outspeed here anyway. Astro Barrage and just Psychic here into Tapu Bulu, I think, is fine. Yep, they're going to Poltergeist us. They're going to target Lele, no problem. Now Astro Barrage should get the KO onto the Giratina. It'll give us a special attack boost, and then we should win this game by 1 HP, regardless of what Bulu has here, thanks to us having Focus Sash. You can see how much of a game changer Focus Sash on Calyrex is as an item, though. It's been so huge for us here, so, yep. That gets us the KO, beautiful, and yep, we do indeed still outspeed Tapu Bulu even after they got a speed boost, which is obviously very nice for us. Ooh, it is Horn Leech. I mean, that will let them recover up a little bit, but I still don't think you can survive this next turn, since it's a single target attack and we have a special attack boost, so we should be good. Tapu Bulu was really cool, though, and honestly, this Giratina, like, I definitely underestimated a little bit, and yeah. It was mainly just thinking that I didn't really need to set up speed control in this game. Just expanding force here, Psychic Terrain is up. Yeah, I was mainly not expecting any speed control from their end outside of Quash from Sableye, so if I had clicked Tailwind with Whimsicott, then I just outspeed with all of my Pokemon, right? And then, like, Lele just gets another extra attack off, for example. Entei would actually faint in that position anyway, but then I don't have to worry about my opponent outspeeding me. So, even though we won that one, it wasn't the cleanest of games, and I would have preferred to have clicked Tailwind with Whimsicott there, just because, like, they had no way to deny it, right? And then, okay, let's say I Tailwind there, and then they Quash Wormwind into the Entei slot. One, that's not even a guaranteed KO, and even if they get the KO onto that, then I can just bring in the Calyrex, and then go from there. So, yeah. But they made some really nice predictions. Like, to go for the Quash play onto the Whimsicott rather than the Entei was really smart, and punish me for not setting up Tailwind. And really cool team, honestly. So, let's look for one more. I'd have to say that generally we've won these first 2 games, even though I haven't played, like, super well, because our team just matches up really, really well against our opponents, right? And that's, once again, why, like, the team element and the team that you use in Pokemon is so important, because it just allows you to have more room for errors, right? And it's like I didn't really get to eject out the Dynamax Pokemon in either game today. Like, if we do that, often the game is just over immediately. But even without that, we've still been put into really, really good positions because of just how much damage we can do with all of our Pokemon. So, yeah. Alright, the interesting restricteds continue as we're up against a Dialga here. I always love playing the earlier days of the ranked season when you gotta climb back up to Master Ball tier, because you just run into some really cool team comps. So, Dialga is not exactly the easiest matchup for us, honestly. We don't have many super effective attacks into it. It might be also cool to see Porygon-Z and Cinderace. Like, that reminds me of a, what, series, was it series 6? Series 7? Whatever it was before the restricteds. I think Series 6 was the one that had that ban list, right? So, Thundurus, I think, can be really powerful for us here because they're primarily going to be special attackers with Porygon-Z and Dialga. And their physical attackers, Thundurus just completely demolishes in the Rillaboom and the Urshifu. The main Pokemon's obviously Cinderace that I have to watch out for. But the reason I like Thundurus is because I outspeed both Dialga and Porygon-Z. The main max moves that you want to go with those Pokemon are Max Strike and Wormwind. And both of those would actually give us Defiant Boost as well. So, yeah, Whimsicott plus Thundurus. They don't have great Fairy resists. So I don't mind the Lele here. And obviously Calyrex is the 4th. I say obviously, but nah, I think we still gotta bring it. Entei is not that great here without knowing the Urshifu type, I think, and it's not, like, terrible into Cinderace, I suppose. And then Urshifu is a Pokemon I'd actually really want to bring, because they're really weak into water and fighting, but I don't have Focus Sash on it, and so it can get one-shot pretty easily, right? So, yeah. The idea here is that Assault Vest Dynamax Thundurus is just generally powerful, and can also give us speed boosts on our Pokemon. So let's say they set up Tailwind while our Pokemon are already faster, so we can match their Tailwind and essentially go from there. I'm going to go with Whimsicott and Porygon. I almost want to just switcheroo Porygon turn 1 and then max Airstream it, because they're definitely going to max that, I think. But there's a small possibility they go for like a Tailwind, or sorry, a Trick Room. And if they Trick Room while I Tailwind, I actually think it would be really bad for us. Yeah, and with Porygon here, it's like, do you really want to go for a max move on turn 1 onto us? That would activate Defiant. I'm not really sure you want to. So I'm actually down to max Knuckle Porygon and Switcheroo here. They could go for the 50-50 speed tie between Whimsicotts if they're running Taunt and just try to taunt us immediately. That would be a pretty powerful play, and I would actually consider that in their positions, especially if you have Focus Sash on your Whimsicott. But the main thing here is that, like, I could actually see them running Trick Room on Porygon, maybe on Whimsicott as well, so I just want to try to deny that on turn 1. Now, if Whimsicott Trick Rooms, I don't really have great counterplay to that, unfortunately, but yeah, we'll see. And if Porygon just maxes and max strikes, well, I'll just force the Porygon out and actually get the eject stuff off, and I think that's pretty sweet. And they're going to Dynamax. Okay, not bad. Best case scenario here is them targeting the Thundurus, because then I can just Tailwind the next turn with my Whimsicott. But either way, this is already a pretty strong start, I'd say. I guess even better is if, what, maybe Whimsicott goes for Trick Room instead? I mean, that would actually just, like, we just win the game on turn 1 if Whimsicott tried to do that. Okay, nice. We get Switcheroo off, so no taunt at least. Take away the Life Orb. Yeah, they did just Tailwind. Okay. Now, the reason I want to play cautiously against Trick Room is because this team is so hyper-offensive that if you let Trick Room go up, it can just often be a complete disaster. Wow, that's interesting. They actually risked the Max Strike onto Thundurus, so that actually does activate Defiant as well. And now this is quite nice because my Whimsicott now can just potentially Tailwind next turn. Does Max Knuckle get the knockout here? I'm not sure. But either way, we force Porygon-Z out, which is already pretty sweet. Here's Max Knuckle. It does not get the KO, but that's okay. Okay, cool. Now, the main question I have here is still whether or not Whimsicott has Tailwind or sorry, Taunt. Because if you have Taunt, you can obviously Taunt my Whimsicott this next turn. So if I wanted to ensure Tailwind, I can actually switch out Thundurus into Lele to set up the Psychic Terrain. And I know that seems kind of wild, but I actually think it's worth considering because I think our late game is a lot stronger than my opponent's, given that we have Calyrex. Like, I think their Dynamax is a lot more important to them winning the game than ours is to winning the game. Okay, so they bring out Cinderace. Fine just going for max Airstream. I'm fine Airstreaming and Tailwinding here. If you have Taunt, so be it. Cinderace then... the question is, the Cinderace get a KO onto Thunders. You're not going to have Life Orb here. So the question is whether or not a Pyro Ball actually does enough to KO us. I actually think the answer is probably still yes here, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not targeting Whimsicott here because, like, it doesn't do that much past turn 1 after setting up Tailwind, so I don't actually mind attacking around it. And if they don't have Taunt here, they might still KO the Thunders before I move, but then I just bring in Calyrex and Lele and just sweep the game from there. And no Taunt comes out, which is amazing for us to see. So this should just win us the game, honestly. I don't see how my opponent beats... it's a cool bounce, okay? But I don't think it changes much. I don't see how they beat this late game Lele Calyrex combination, because I can just spam Astral Barrage and Expanding Force. Moonblast and a Thunderous. A little risky there because you can actually Defiant again. And yeah, they do activate Defiant, but I suppose they don't really care right now because we're in a spot where I am just gonna pick up the knockout anyway. But yeah, we got Thundurus the +5 attack. Unexpected. Okay, so Cinderace bounce is going to go into Whimsicott here, so we can always just max Airstream to Cinderace for a KO. And I don't mind giving up my Whimsicott here. There's no additional value I get from it. Actually, Switcheroo here onto the Whimsicott to steal their potential Focus Sash would have been kind of cool. But I don't mind it keeping its Focus Sash. I could have gone for Helping Hand as well. I don't really think I need to do that here. So there's bounce. Yep. Okay. Yeah, and like the reason why I don't really want to give Whimsicott a Life Orb here is because with that Life Orb, maybe you actually KO my Thundurus then. But without Life Orb, we should definitely survive here. And now we get the knockout on a Cinderace. Perfect. Okay, so that's out of the way, and now this grants me a free switch in as well. I always want to go into Calyrex first here rather than Tapu Lele because I'd want to win the Terrain War, right? And so by going out into Calyrex, even if you go out into Rillaboom, then I could just switch into Lele. But if I bring in Lele here, then their Rillaboom's slower than us, which should be the case, then they're going to win the Terrain War, meaning that they can go for a Fake Out or just a Grassy Glide / Wood Hammer onto the Lele slot. By bringing out Calyrex here, it's also a Ghost type, so you can't Fake Out into it, and so I think it's just the best Pokemon to bring in. So the game's still not 100% over yet, but I feel very good about my position. First of all, we have a Thundurus that's really boosted up. But the thing is that Thundurus might actually feint to a Moonblast, right? Another interesting consideration could have been to Switcheroo the Whimsicott and Airstream it, get rid of your Focus Sash, and then KO you, but maybe Whimsicott considers protecting in that position, and that could be scary. Okay, so they're going to bring in Porygon-Z as I bring out my Calyrex. No problem. Their Tailwind's about to expire. We still have a couple turns on ours. Thundurus' Dynamax ends, and so Moonblast now will certainly KO us. Let's just double check the board state real quick. 2 turns of Tailwind, 1 turn of Tailwind. Actually, we could still lose this if their last one is Rillaboom, right? Like here, I think I'm going to switch Thundurus out into Tapu Lele. And then just Expanding Force. But what's scary is, let's say Whimsicott's Focus Sashed. Actually, no, even if you're Sashed, you'd have to Tailwind next turn, right? And the thing is, Calyrex should just be able... Like, first of all, Porygon-Z needs to protect this turn, and I think they probably will, but even if they do, it's fine. The idea here was to just get Psychic Terrain up so I can use Expanding Force and hit both Pokemon. Actually, a Rillaboom switch in here would have been really cool, but they actually just opt for Helping Hand, okay? I think that actually always just loses them the game now. But what scenario does that potentially save them? Maybe if I don't have Focus Sash on Calyrex and then I Astral Barrage and I get careless, like not targeting Porygon-Z with the Calyrex. But given the move that I made, I think there's nothing they can really do at this point, especially with Tailwind petering out as well. Even if your last Pokemon is Rillaboom, it's actually Dialga, which makes more sense given that that's their restricted Pokemon. We still have our Focus Sash intact with Calyrex, which is beautiful. Double checking the board state. 1 turn of Tailwind left on our end, plus 1 special attack. So I don't mind just going for a... I don't mind Dazzling here and Astral Barraging. I think with that, Calyrex with Focus Sash here at this point should just win us the game. Maybe instead of Dazzle, I like Moonblasting into Dialga more, but the idea here is in case Whimsicott is Protect, I always get guaranteed damage onto Dialga, but they just offer Tailwind, which is totally fine with me. Yeah, and the problem for Dialga here is that you don't have too many great spread type attacks, and so I should be able to just, like, clean up, right? Like, even if your Dialga were to one-shot Calyrex, and we have Focus Sash anyway, so that's never going to be the case, but even if that were the case, the only really good spread type attack that Dialga gets access to is Blizzard, and without that, we outspeed anyway. Yeah, there's not much that they can do. So, yeah, I mean, like, the fun thing about this team is that you don't need to rely on the switcheroo and the eject button strategy, but it can just give you, like, such an advantageous position if you get it off, right? In games 1 and 2, we didn't even restrict our opponent's Dynamax with it, but in game 3, allowing Porygon-Z to get 1 turn of max is a really big deal, especially because Porygon-Z is one of those Pokemon that's like super reliant on Dynamax and so much weaker outside of Dynamax. So yeah, overall you can just see the strength of this team. It really puts on the pressure on turn 1, and even if you don't play perfectly, it just gives you a pretty significant advantage often because of how strong the Pokemon are. So like I mentioned when I was, describing the team, I got crushed against this team a couple of times when I was trying out other teams, and it was just really fast-paced, really offensive, and it felt overwhelming often. And, Calyrex Shadow Rider Hyper Offense certainly isn't anything new, but there are a couple of fun tricks on this team, like that Dynamax Entei with the Life Orb, the Focus Sash on the Calyrex, Expanding Force Spam with the Choice Specs Tapu Lele rather than like Choice Scarf Tapu Lele, and of course the Switcheroo Eject button on the Whimsicott as well. So, yeah. That's going to be it for this one, so thank you so much as always for watching. It's wild to think that this is finally the last month of Series 11, and after this we'll be playing Series 12 for the remainder of basically, the next 6-7 months or so up until Worlds, right? And so, yeah, I'm obviously very excited to dive into Series 12, but still going to try to feature some high, ranking teams and just strong teams in Series 11 for those that still want to continue playing this format, and obviously this format is a good kind of precursor for the next one. So, yeah, thanks so much as always for watching. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll see you all soon. All right, peace.